Good morning, and welcome to OpenLine Online, Sunday, September 15th. And I want to welcome you all. We've been off for 2 weeks, but we are back on and glad to be in studio. And I'm going to introduce the panel so we can get started. First up is Attorney Bob Pickett. Good morning, Brother Pickett. How are you?
Good morning, team, and good morning to all the folks out there listening to us on this wonderful, wonderful Sunday morning.
We have half of the History Brothers, and I call them Brother Protest, Brother Larry Ham. Good morning, brother.
Good morning. And Brother Protest will be protesting next Saturday. Impeach Trump. March and rally in Newark.
All right, we'll
Next
make sure
Saturday.
we get that time and location out before the end of the show.
Yes.
We also have half of the Sports Brothers. We have our good brother Bobby Childs. Good morning, Brother Bobby.
Good morning, all. Welcome. It's great to be back. I will be dashing out of here to go cover the Giants home opener, and hopefully the New York sports teams, football teams, will do better this week than they did last week.
And returning, and a lot of folks inquired about this sister here, and the last time you was here it was a heated discussion, and then you wasn't
Did they
back
think
the
I
next
ran
week.
away?
Some people did.
No.
There you go, and she's back in the building, and right here,
Never.
in flesh and color.
Yeah, you all should talk to my
Jennifer?
family. They know that I don't run away from a fight.
Jennifer Jones Austin.
I'm glad to be here. And I am going to have to run out a little earlier than I hope, but just know that it's because I got to go speak somewhere.
Right, and I just want to let everybody know that the Emmis family is WBLS, Hot 97, and 1190 WLIB will be participating in the 50th anniversary of the African American Day Parade in Harlem down Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard. So that begins at 1 p.m. this afternoon and runs till 6 p.m. So come out, support. We BLS, Hot 97, and 1190 WLIB will have a float out there. Be out there waving to the folks out there. We have our WBLS and other shirts on. And we look forward to seeing you out there. Great weather for a parade, and we'll be out there.
And for those of you who are wondering, Nither is in the building, so she will be joining us shortly. You know she has to make her own sort of entrance. So please send comments about can she be here on time next time. So
Yeah. If it's Joy Reid, she'd be on time. I guess you know I'm going to throw that one out there. I'm starting to fight already. I told you, bring your boxing gloves, girl.
I'm starting to believe that she has a little chocolate in her as well.
Oh, Lord.
Y'all hear what he's saying?
You heard what he said.
We ain't going to laugh at that one.
There you go. Well, Nither will be joining us in a few minutes. Before we hit the topics, I want to just say this. The radio station, Emmis Broadcasting, they kept their word. They said that they were going to create a Bob Slade Scholarship Fund. And they have created the Bob Slade Scholarship Fund, and I'm glad to say that. And, of course, you know that Bob Slade, he studied journalism and communications at Queen College. He's a Harlem, New York native. And Bob believed in passing the baton and helping out folks. Everybody that's sitting in this room, pretty much Bob Slade passed the baton to, or we received that baton and we passed it on. That was how Bob Slade lived his life. And you out there can make a difference for a student. So we want you to, we need your help. We need your help to raise funds and make this dream a reality. There's a student out there that could make a difference in this world with your financial support. So how can you do this? Very easy. Just log on to the WBLS website, WBLS.com. You can go there. You'll find out more information, and you will also find out how to donate. Again, the Bob Slade Scholarship Fund. For more information and to donate, go to the WBLS website at WBLS.com. And I'm glad that we get that out there. All right, this has been a busy week. I know that we've been off for 2 weeks, and I know that we cannot cover 3 weeks in pretty much an hour. We know we're not running 2 hours a day because a lot of us have to get somewhere. I got to get to the parade. Bobby Childs got to get to the Giant game, and so on. And of course, we introduced, but I will give her proper introductions. She's joined us.
Good morning.
Sister Nitha
Yeah, you're only
Khan.
saying nice things, right, Fatine?
I told you, bring them boxing gloves, girl.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. So here we go.
Before you do that, just
Yes.
I do remember you talked about Bob Slade's scholarship, which if you could contribute to it, I strongly encourage it. You're correct. Many of us, if not all of us, have benefited from the wisdom and guidance of Bob. There was also another scholarship that took place recently for one of the Central Park Five. Kevin Richardson had a dream to go to Syracuse University. And through the unfortunate situation of his incarceration and subsequent release, Syracuse University did a very nice thing, and they actually put in place a scholarship for him. So he's been up at the university. They gave him, he was a big basketball fan, so they gave him a jersey with his name. But there is now a Kevin Richardson scholarship at Syracuse University.
Speaking of the Central Park Five and Bob Slade, that
now
was
known
one-
as the Exonerated Five.
Exactly.
Right,
I was
right.
getting ready to say that. That's how I.
Exonerated Five. Bob Slade, that was his. That was such a strong matter for him, and but for the fact that he continued to keep that news story in the front pages and presented it to the audience consistently, and it is said by a whole lot of people that but for Bob Slade staying on top of this, these kids would not have been freed and their convictions vacated.
Right.
Bob
Right.
did that.
Well, he didn't do it all alone. He did
do
it
it all
with He
alone.
did not do it all alone.
It was
We
with
did
us. It was with us.
With the team. And last Saturday at the Exonerated Five and Trip, along with myself, we brought them up in the center stage. At the Circle of Sisters, they received an award. And these brothers, 4 out of the 5, were there. And then I got a chance to do a one-on-one interview with the 4 brothers. And you can go to WBLS.com and go to the website and go to videos, and you can see my one-on-one interview with the brothers. And, of course, I brought up Bob Slade's name, and they ran with it. They ran with it, So go to WBLS.com to see that one-on-one interview that I did with the Central Park, now known as the Exonerated Five.
And they acknowledged
Actually, at
that-
last night at the Congressional Black Caucus
they were there.
Foundation Gala, they were there and they were recognized with an award by the Congressional Black
Wonderful.
Caucus for their courage, their bravery, their
Right.
triumph over, that which many of us appreciate would be the unimaginable.
Exactly.
How they've stayed the course and they're moving forward with their lives, and through their story, they are really, they're strengthening others.
Right.
to stay the
They
course.
acknowledged that, and they thanked WBLS for continuing that fight for them.
Yeah,
Yes.
they,
Yeah, they did.
yeah. At Circle of Sisters, they thank Bob's. Actually, they gave Bob Slade a shout out too on stage.
Oh,
I
yeah,
think it was Raymond Santana.
Right. Go to the one-on-one
good.
interview. You'll see
That's good.
how they got a chance to really mention, the open line. When you hear one of the Exonerated Five say, when I turned on the radio, and I heard Open Line talking about our case. He said, "You don't know how that made me feel." So I don't want to give too much away. Go to WBLS.com. I also did a one-on-one interview with Tamika Mallory, who was also given, really, the Phoenix Award by the Circle of Sisters. I also did a one-on-one interview with Tamika Mallory, and I bring that up because you hear of icons of women in the movement, but they don't get the recognition that they should. And I said to Tamika Mallory, "You're so important because you are a younger civil rights activist out here reaching out to the old, but you're also reaching the young. A lot of times, some of our elders, that they don't reach the young, and we have to be real." But she talks about her upbringing, about her family bringing her to the rallies with Reverend Sharpton, and then, of course, she headed up Reverend Sharpton's organization, and she talked about much more. So go to WBLS.com.
We should just clarify. She was the executive director, like running the day-to-day affairs of the organization while
Exactly.
he maintained like leadership and vision.
Exactly. And also, I say that on the heels of another iconic civil rights sister activist is the passing, and we send our condolences to the Abernathy family for the passing of Sister Mrs. Juanita Abernathy, the wife of Reverend Abernathy, that passed. And Jennifer, you got a chance to know the Abernathy family. I'll let you share a few words before we get into some of our news topics.
So, when King was president of the National Southern Christian Leadership Conference, my father was president of the New York chapter of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and there was an arm of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference that was focused on economic justice. Ralph Abernathy oversaw that, and when King died, Ralph Abernathy initially became president, and Jesse Jackson then oversaw the economic justice piece. But because Abernathy, oversaw that body of work of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, my family and his family spent a lot of time together. And my mother, for years, has often talked about she had a good relationship with Juanita Abernathy, and she often talked about how she was really a powerful force that never really received a lot of the recognition. In the aftermath of King's death, we heard a lot about what Coretta Scott King did, but we didn't really hear about Donsley. Donsley is one of the daughters. Juanita Abernathy's contributions. She was the architect, many say, of the boycott plan, the business plan around the boycott, and just a force. I mean, even unto her, like the final years leading up to her death, small-framed woman, but just feisty. And like always just like charging people with their responsibilities to stay the course and to do the work. And so it's just we need to lift her up and honor her and lift up her family in prayer.
Yes, and when she walked in the room, she lit up a room. I'm glad I had a chance to meet her and speak with her. Matter of fact, on one of Reverend Sharpton's anniversaries, on his national radio show, I had her call in as a special guest, and Reverend Sharpton was very, very surprised.
Nice.
All right, Bobby, any comments before we start on these topics?
Well, pardon me. Aside from people asking Jennifer to speak into the mic so they can hear the wonderful things she's talking
I'm
about.
sorry. Hey, is this better?
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess so. Everyone, we do want a lot of people are interested in our views on the debate, so I believe that's where
That's
you're
where
taking
we're
us
going.
next,
That's
right?
the first thing on the topic out here. If you can see this, there is the winners, the losers, the snoozers at the third 2020 Democratic debate of the Democratic candidates out there. And we have a go-around here. We had 10 candidates this past week that were on the debate stage, which was good. Instead of having two nights, you had the leading candidates that are leading in the polls out there. So you had from former Vice President Joe Biden, Senator Bernie Sanders, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Senator Cory Booker. You had Mayor Pete Buttigieg. We had Senator Kamala Harris, Andrew Yang, former Representative Beto O'Rourke, and former HUD Secretary Julian Castro, and Senator Amy Klobuchar. So we had 10 candidates, one night, long night, but a lot of issues were discussed. So Jennifer, I'll start with you, and we have a go around, and let's talk about what did you think about the debate this past
So
week.
first thing I'm going to tell you is that I'm going to be very honest and tell you that it was hard to pay attention for 3 hours.
Thank you.
I felt like it was a little too long. It seemed they were a little bit more long-winded, but maybe that's because they had more time this go-round, and because there were fewer. There weren't fewer, but because there were 10 in each of them, it felt like, okay, here we go again. The first 30 minutes were very interesting. There were moments throughout it that were interesting. I think the political pundits have already talked this up and down, and they said, Bernie did well in the beginning, not well, like for the remainder of not Bernie, I'm sorry.
Joe Biden.
Joe Biden did well at the beginning.
You just had a Bidenism.
I just had a Bidenism.
Wow.
That's my defense of him, right?
That's it,
Because
that's
I have
right.
some Bidenisms, right? And gaps don't speak to intelligence or ageism, right? But and defending him on that, I'm not defending
Yes.
him on much. I'm not saying much more about when I'm defending him on his positions. But they said he did well in the beginning. I think Cory Booker had a good night. Elizabeth Warren seemed to be missing. Bernie, much of what we've heard from him before. I think Beto O'Rourke had a standout moment with his take on, how he would handle assault weapons. And I think Julian Castro, maybe we've seen the last of him because of how what went down.
Bobby?
I would agree. 3 hours was much, and in our society today, the unfortunate thing is we live in sound bites,
Right.
And so what'll come out from those 3 hours, every one of the candidates, their teams are going to sift through everything to find that 30-second, that 10-second soundbite to try to create the narrative. So anyone who went through the 3 hours, I commend you. It is tough. I think it was tough for those candidates as well, because it's not how you start the race. Usually it's how you finish. But many of them started off strong and never made it to the finish line out there. Just on this point about the gaffes that Joe Biden makes, everybody makes a gaffe. It's how you respond to them. So if you look at who's currently sitting in the president's chair, he makes gaffes all the time.
All day.
The difference is he never admits it or accepts it. Joe has accepted it and is trying not to make it a big deal, and he comes back and clarifies and talks about things. So I'm pretty much tired of the attacks against him because we all make them. And people who are throwing the stones at him, I'm sure if they just looked in the mirror, they would see that they had some gaffes in their lives as well. Now, people say, well, as a president, you should not do that. I'm sorry, there's never been a president in our history who has been perfect. So expecting perfection when you're making public speeches, I don't care about that so much. I care more about the perfection when you're making decisions that impact every citizen in this country.
It's interesting you say that because the same thing can be said about Castro, right? That when he hit back at Biden, that we give Donald Trump a pass to always do that, to punch at people, to go hard, or as he says, to punch back harder than they hit him. But when somebody else does it, they're done, and that's the end of them. So that also talks to this larger notion of why Trump gets away with everything, and everybody else is held to a much higher standard and has to be perfect. But that being said, I do agree the debate was way too long. It should have only been, honestly, 2 hours would have been more than enough. But I will give ABC credit in that their questions were far better than when CNN held the debate. Even though there were still a lot of topics that I wish that they touched on, more foreign policy, women's rights. There was a lot of issues that they could have delved into more. Their questions were definitely far better than CNN. I think...
I just want to quickly say to you, just something to keep in mind. I appreciate the point that you made about, is there a different standard for Julian Castro or others as compared to Donald Trump? My question would be, and I mean, we don't know, but my question would be, if Julian Castro were polling at a higher number, might he get a pass, right? But when you're polling and you're not even, getting 2%, and you have an episode like that playing out across the national scene, and it looks like you're taking a jab at somebody based on age, I think that may be what does him in. If he was Biden doing that, if he was Kamala or Elizabeth Warren doing that, Kamala Harris, if he was Bernie Sanders, it might not affect him as much. That's just.
I think that's why he did it, though, in order to bring attention to him and separate himself.
Right.
And because he knew this is his last shot. This is
Right.
the last chance he had to really, step forward even
Agreed.
further and raise the polling. So I think that's why he did that. But overall, I think Warren, she did well. It's weird because I felt like Warren and Bernie had more talking time in the beginning, or the first half of the debate, and then it sort of dissipated, or not as much later on. But I think they did well. Biden, I don't think I think he pretty much stayed the same. It's like he didn't hurt himself really too much. He didn't really, do exceptionally well. He just did okay. So it was just, I keep saying we're so far out. We still have a year to go before the actual election. We have a long time before Iowa, but we'll see what happens. I
Yeah,
mean,
what just on that one, Biden, right? And I do think he hurt him. Well, I think he reinforced some things about himself that are not forward thinking, right? And so even his and I don't consider this a gaffe, his frame of references are still rooted in the past. And then that also
much so.
influences, and I know on the radio side, Professor Eddie Glaude had raised this, right? His explanation around how to help African Americans was still sort of antiquated and pointing fingers at the family needs to have outside help come into their household to do things, which is that's very dated, right? So that's where I see him, right? He's still, so all the criticism about he's not a progressive thinker, that gets washed into, do you need to be far to the left? He'll never be that way, but he could be a lot closer to speaking in more modern terms and showing some evolution in his thought.
That's a nice way of putting it.
And I just haven't seen that right now. So Elizabeth Warren, I give her credit, even though she didn't speak much. She actually had more details around how. Right. So coming into it, many of the candidates talk about what they would do. For me personally, as a voter,
she's got a plan for
right?
everything.
Everybody says they have a plan, but most of the people articulate their plan in terms of here's what my plan is going to do. But very few of them talk about how will I make that come to life. She's starting over the last probably like month and a half, 2 months to put more meat on how I'm going to do things. And you started to see some of that with healthcare, where a few of them are saying, we believe in this, but we have to phase it. She's actually deeper into it. Bernie has not really gone much deeper into how he plans on getting there. He continues to reinforce, I want to get there. And he talks about the amount of money it's going to take. But when you really think about how are you going to tell someone that who's used to receiving the care they're doing right now, how are you going to communicate to them that you have to give it up? It won't be to your detriment. It's going to be to the betterment of society. There's a depth of conversation that he just hasn't had with the
think
public.
so?
So
That's a good segue.
Wait, let me go to Larry. Let's finish and go
Okay.
around because it's not fair. Let Larry and Bob pick it. Go ahead, Larry.
Well, I thought it was a very interesting debate. I don't think the debate moved the needle any. I think that basically the candidates have the same amount of support now that they had prior to the debate. Cory Booker is still down at 2%. Julian Castro is still down around that area. According to the mainstream polls, Bernie and Warren are still contending for second place. So I don't think the debate moved the voters that much. What I did see in the debate is the weakness of the center of the Democratic Party. The center is in trouble. Joe Biden represents the center, and Joe Biden is going to have more and more difficulty, and I think I agree with this part of what Bobby said, that whereas Biden may not have hurt himself, he did in fact reinforce people's perception that he has difficulty explaining himself. In fact, in the second half of the debate, some of his answers were so muddled, you really couldn't figure out what exactly he was saying. And that he may be able to get through in the Democratic fish tank. But what happens if he has to debate Trump? I mean, it's going to be a knife fight, you know, and I think the whole party is nervous about this. You know, it was very interesting. There was a GQ article that came out. I don't know, it didn't get a lot of attention, but the fact that President Obama himself tried to convince Joe Biden not to run before he announced. Now, nobody's talking about that article, but it was an extensive article in GQ.
Why did he? What did President Obama say, or why? What motivated him to say this?
Well, I think that it was an argument about the need to let new folks, new blood in the area.
blood, right?
You know, I thought Bernie Sanders did well. People say, well, Bernie Sanders said the same thing. Yes, Bernie Sanders is putting forward a program that benefits working and poor people in this country and the middle class. And he says it again and again and again. And I don't care if he says it the same way. His program is the program. You know, it's interesting. Right after the debate, an ABC reporter went up to two young black women and asked them, who do you think won the debate? Both of them said Bernie Sanders. Why did they say that? Because Bernie Sanders' program is speaking to the needs of the people. These students are graduating with tens of thousands of dollars of loans, student loans, which will prevent them from not only owning a house, but maybe even owning a car. You know, Bernie Sanders is putting forward a program. I mean, I had this situation with my own children, a program for health care for all that will benefit young people. You know, he's putting forward, people talk about Bernie doesn't have a program. Bernie's programs are so detailed that they could not give him time to actually explain fully all of those programs. But he says essentially, we're going to pay for these programs by making the wealthiest part of this society pay their fair share of taxes, which they have not done for over half a century. Under Republican presidents, the wealthy class paid 10 times more in taxes than they are paying now. And Bernie has put forward a detailed housing program. He's put forward a detailed employment program. He's put forward a detailed education program. He's put forward a detailed foreign policy, and so on and so forth. You have to go to his website and read these things. Then the other thing is how these debates are structured. The amount of time a candidate may or may not have is really based on what questions will be asked of them. The only thing they get to do is make an opening statement and a closing statement. The rest of the debate is really guided by those persons who are moderating the debate. And you can see this. You can see how certain candidates, like Joe Biden, get asked more questions than the rest, and that may have a lot to do with the fact that according to mainstream polls, Joe is still the leader.
Right.
So, you know, all of this you have to take with a grain of salt. And as one person said on the radio side, Hillary Clinton, and I agreed with her, Hillary Clinton won all the debates at 16, but she didn't win the election. So we always have to keep that in mind, that these debates and these polls are really secondary and tertiary. What's primary is who wins the contest.
Let me go to Bob Pickett, and then I'm going to throw out, and we'll talk about what you just mentioned about Hillary Clinton winning those debates, and we'll talk about electability. Go ahead, Brother Pickett.
Well, thank
your
you very-
assessment about that.
Yeah, thank you very much for team. And let me say that I concur generally with most of the comments that have been made thus far. My assessment is the big winner of the debate was our good brother from Newark, New Jersey, you know, and I think that
Cory Booker?
Yeah, I think Cory did reasonably well in articulating the issues, addressing the issues, and coming up with a way of proving that he can be successful in developing alternative ways of communicating with his constituency. To me, the big loser was the gentleman from where was he from? Cruz.
Castro, you mean?
Castro.
Oh,
Julian
okay.
Castro.
Castro. What is he from Cuba?
No. He's
No.
a native-born American.
Native-born
Bob.
American.
Okay. He vibed like he was from Cuba for some reason. Originally, that's what I mean.
Man,
That's
you,
what I mean.
No.
you better quit while you ahead.
You better quit, yeah.
Pass the mic.
You can't run for president and
when
be
you
from
have
another
a-
country.
No.
When you're
No,
behind.
I'm saying ultimately. No. What I'm
Time
saying
for commercial break.
that
Quit, Bob.
his origination was from Cuba. And he
Quit,
came
Bob,
to-
Bob.
We're gonna move on.
Yeah, we got Bob. That's it.
But is anything
Yeah, I
else?
want. Yeah, wait.
But anyway,
Your Republican is showing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Let
like-
me.
Yeah, but anyway, I think that Joe did reasonably well. You know, there's a lot of game playing that goes on when you're the designated leader in a political campaign. Having worked on a major campaign a long time ago, I know firsthand, you know, the games that are being played in a political contest. But the big winner to me was Cory Booker.
Got you.
He stood out.
Yeah, let me just say this here, and I want to throw out the question dealing with electability. I agree with you on that one, Bob Pickett. I thought that Senator Cory Booker did a very good job. And, you know, I go back to when Reverend Sharpton ran for president, and a lot of people ask, well, why are you running for president? You know you cannot win. And one of the things that Reverend Sharpton said, and of course he was going out there trying to win, but one of the things he says is that, you know what, sometimes, you know, you're waiting for other people to throw you a crumb to bring up our issues. Right. So sometimes we need to be sitting at the table to have that conversation. Fast forward, we had an African-American president. You have 2 African-American senators now that's part of the running for the presidential nomination for the Democratic Party. And Cory Booker is a senator. That's Senator Cory Booker. And he's former mayor of Newark, New Jersey. Agree or disagree with how he did Newark, New Jersey, I've seen how he has handled himself as a senator. So far, he has done a good job. And he's not just there as a token. He's bringing those issues that affect people of color, and he brings up a lot of other issues. So I agree with you, Pickett, about him winning the debate. I go on to the springboard into this question is about electability. As you just said, Larry, the needle may have not moved. I have not seen the polls. I don't know who they're polling out here, because a lot of times, a lot of us that are political savvy, we'll watch MSNBC, we'll watch CNN or Fox News or whatever you tend to watch on the cable networks. A lot of people are running to and fro from work, dealing with what's what. The election is not in their head right now. So however they're polling, I don't know how they're polling. A lot of things could be
They're polling you now.
Yeah, can be recognition. It could be
Right,
recognition.
right.
But we didn't get a chance to talk about it, but I want to throw it out here before Jennifer has to leave. Electability. And how can we have the conversation on electability this early, Jennifer, where, you know, we just completed the 3rd debate. How do we have this question about electability with the candidates out there?
So I'm going to drop this, and then unfortunately I've got to run. But I think that we're going to be talking about this for weeks and months to come, and hopefully I can come back and spend some more time with you.
Yes.
I'm going to be very honest and tell you that it is hard for me at this point in the process to even lean in on a lot of the issues. I know the candidates. I like a lot of what Bernie Sanders has said through the years. I like what Elizabeth Warren stands for and what she said. There's some things that, you know, I found interesting about Kamala Harris. There's some things that I question, right? And I could go down the road. I like how Beto O'Rourke, as a white male, speaks out on issues that, you know, we've got black males and females who dare not even talk about the things that he talks about with such fire and, you know, and conviction, right? There's a lot to learn from each of them and hear them. I can't really lean in yet because I'm looking at the America that we live in, that, you know, that has shown us with the election of Barack Obama and how they engaged around Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, to, you know, what went down with Hillary Clinton and how more than 50% of white women would not come out and vote for Hillary Clinton, right? Voted for Trump over Hillary Clinton, to many staying at home and saying, you know, they couldn't make a choice. White men voting overwhelmingly for Trump, right? And even black men voting for Trump. So it's hard for me to, in some ways, get into the issues and the ideologies, because I'm trying to figure out what is the nation we're living in today and who's really showing up at the polls. And then we have to think about, okay, is this, I'm just going to put it out there, is this transition president or is this revolutionary presidency? This particular time. Figuring out how do we get steal back, if you will. And I don't mean steal in a negative way, but really like reclaim. And how do we do it and in what stages? Now, I say that as somebody who has led organizations. I say that as somebody who has watched leaders who are transition leaders, interim leaders who come in with bold vision and ideas that the country, that organizations aren't ready for. So I'm in this space right now of we need to really start leaning in on that question. We can talk about ideology and issues all we want. But we may put somebody out there with with a set of issues and an ideology that we like and we lean into, but many in this country don't, and we may find ourselves where we are right now. That's my thought.
Well
I gotta
said.
go.
All right.
Good to see you.
Jennifer Jones Austin.
You're always welcome. You're always welcome.
Always. Sorry, guys. Hugs and kisses.
Uh-huh.
Gotcha. All right. Go ahead, team. Jump on in about the electability. Or should we be having that conversation at this stage? We haven't even got to the first primary yet. Should we be talking electability at this time?
Yeah, it's already being talked about. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying, should we be doing that?
Of course, I mean, because you have to talk about who can beat Donald Trump, who can be elected. But I still go back to, it was interesting because even during this debate, it was Klobuchar who tried again to separate herself from the progressives. I forgot what her exact comment was, but, trying to present herself as the mainstream candidate, same thing with Biden. And I just go back to, we still have not resolve that rift that we saw in 2016 between the progressive younger base and the Democratic establishment. And my worry is that the establishment is still trying to push that middle of the road candidate who they think is going to bring Trump supporters in. And you're not, the big mistake that they're making is you're not going to convert these Trump supporters. They're not going to leave him. They are ride or die. It's like a cult. No matter what he does, they're going to be with him. So forget about them and instead focus on your base, which is people of color, which is younger folks, which is progressives. And that's who you have to bring in. And it has to be somebody that energizes that base, those folks to come out to the polls who then motivate everybody else to come around. Because it's not going to be the people who are like, all right, I don't care either way, I'm comfortable. They're not the ones who are going to be out there on the ground, mobilizing for you. It has to be that base.
One quick question for Nidha. Just a quick question for Nidha. You mentioned that they should go. What about those that I agree that they should go at their base, but I think they should extend. And this is my question to you, Nidha. What about those folks that are in those swing states that voted for Obama? 2016 voted for Obama. Was it 26? No,
2012.
2012, right? Because it's 2016, right? And then
And
they
then switched
changed
over
over to Trump. Shouldn't we be going at them because strategically
No,
it's
because
about the electoral college?
It's blatantly clear for those people where you stand. This election is either you're with Trump or you're not with him. So there's no in between. It's either you're going to vote for Trump or you're going to vote for whoever is not him.
Well,
So
that's what I'm saying. Those folks are out there.
If they're okay still voting for Donald Trump, you're not going to get them. That's my point.
But
It's
they
like
voted Democrat and they voted for Obama before in
right.
2016.
So they have a decision to make.
That's what I'm
Are
saying.
they
That's
gonna
why should we be?
continue-
I just think that the candidates should start to zero in on those folks because those are the people that are going to make a difference in the
I don't
swing
agree.
states and deal with the
Because
electoral
even
college.
in the swing states, there are still. This is a mistake I think people make too. That in Middle America, it's only center right. There are a lot of progressives and liberals all across the country, and I think people always leave them out of the conversation. They present liberals as just on the coast. It's us in New York. It's people in California, but all throughout from coast to coast, there are many progressives, and those people need to be brought in too. And if you focused on them, you don't have to worry about the ones who are in the middle, not sure where they're going to go.
So three things. So first of all, I want to thank Larry again because you always provide education. So as you were talking about Bernie, I made a note to myself, I have to do a lot more research, right, to go and dig into how he's laid out the how. I also have a theory about Amy Klobuchar, which is I believe she's positioning herself to be a VP candidate for Joe Biden.
I thought about that too, actually.
Right. And then the third point that you were talking about, this progressive and liberal out there, again, I live in a lot in the how, right? So I hear what everybody's saying in terms of what, but the how. And then a reality takes over. So I don't disagree with much of what I hear from the progressive side in terms of what should be done. But then I start thinking about how is that going to get done, because you're trying to move from so far over here that this current administration has taken us backwards in time. So to even get back to where we were when he took office is going to take some work. And then to take us from there to where you want to go, as we've seen in this political arena, there are so many obstacles to overcome, particularly if you don't have enough of the support in the three branches of government. And now you have the judges who have been put in place by his regime, who all it takes is a minority to oppose something, to get in a court system to slow it down, and you only have 4 years to deliver on your promises. You look at even some of the criticisms that the current president is going through, is he's promised some things that he can't get done. The
Right.
wall. And he had 2 years with everything lined up in his favor, and he couldn't deliver
I
against
think you
it.
sort of answered your question, because if you can't start off in the middle and then give more concessions. Like, you have to start off really bold, really out there, and then work your way. So like that's what happened with Obamacare. It's like they gave in right from the beginning and started in the middle. Instead of a public option, they gave in and said, okay, we'll just basically do what Romney Care was. So instead of starting out over here, they started off more middle of the road and compromise way from the beginning. So it's like any sort of negotiation, any sort of compromise, you can't give in right from the start. You have to
and
start.
I'm not talking about giving in. So I do hear your point about giving in. I'm just saying, to even get to a point where you can put in some of your foundational pieces, it's like, I think of it in terms of like renovating a house, right? So you got a nice design around the houses, but you see the shape that it's in. Before you can even get to parts that become appealing to everybody, you got to gut this thing. And gutting means you're getting into the walls, the foundation, just to clean it. This current administration has rotted so many things in this country and outside this country. You know, we might get into John Bolton, but outside the United States, where there was fear and respect, we don't worry about this.
Ridicule.
Right. You know, they can't make a decision.
Condemnation.
He has a revolving door around folks. So I'm just saying he continues to rot things, and you have to bring about some of these changes. Just get back to where we were before he took office.
It's going to be tough, but you know, we got to cross that bridge when we come to it. The immediate task, one, is for the Democrats to come up with a candidate, and that will be resolved by the primary process itself. And then the next task is to get rid of Trump, and you know, and then once that's accomplished in November of 2020, the task is going to be to reconstruct America, as Bobby, you were saying, the whole, and that's going to be a struggle in itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's no secret I support Bernie Sanders, but I'm well aware that if Sanders is elected, there'll be more of a struggle to implement his policies after he's president than there is now to get him elected, because the powers that be do not want Bernie Sanders. Of all the candidates,
Yeah, they're scared of him.
he is the one that they fear, because he is the one that is launching a frontal attack on this economic system, on the inequality that's in the economic system, and on the injustice that's in the economic system. He is the one that is most consistent. You can go back to when he first started in politics. I've seen clips of Bernie Sanders 30 years ago talking about Medicare for all. They know they can't compromise with him. They know they can
But
compromise.
can he unify the party?
The-
I hear these
the-
things
the-
that you say, and you're supporting, and I have a problem with that. But can he unify the party and be electable
Well, this
for
this is the
Democratic?
question. Will the moderates in the party and those spokespersons for capital in the Democratic Party in fact unite with the progressive wing for victory? If Sanders or Warren get the Democratic Party nomination, the question is not will the left unify. The question then becomes will the right wing and the center of the party come into
Fall in
coalition
line, yeah.
to in fact support their
Right.
victory? You know, this is about political struggle. It's really not about what I want or what you want. There are forces
Oh, yeah.
moving now that are beyond individual will. This is about what aggregates and collectivities are doing and striving for.
We have to wait for new polls to come out, since the debate this week. But there was a poll that came out at the beginning of the week. It was ABC News, Washington Post poll, and it states that 5 Democratic contenders lead Trump in a head-to-head match. And again, this was before the debate this week. It states that Joe Biden leads Trump by 16 percentage points among adults, 54 to 38%. Bernie Sanders leads by 12 points. Elizabeth Warren by 11 points. Senator Kamala Harris leads by 10 points. And Mayor Pete Buttigieg has a slight 6-point edge. So those individuals right now through that poll state that head-to-head going against President Trump that they would win. Of course, things probably will change. We have to see what the polls say going forward. And then a lot of people don't put a grain of salt into these polls because at times these polls have been wrong.
Well, and that's one of the candidates that didn't make it to the debate stage, Marianne Williamson. That is part of her argument, right? Which is what the Democratic National organization has done in terms of setting the criteria in terms of who makes it to the next round. And a lot of it has to do with polling and dollars earned. And she's saying that just seems to be a forced way and preventing individuals from having an opportunity to actually express and educate people in terms of who they are, because there are some flaws in the polls. I mean, going into the last presidential election, he wasn't in the lead and woke up the next day and he won.
Exactly.
Also, Hillary was projected to win,
Right.
remember?
Right.
And she
Right.
got the popular vote, but did not win the Electoral College. So moving ahead, because I know Bobby has to get out of here, and I want to get him on a couple of other issues. This past Thursday, the House Judiciary Committee approved a resolution defining the rules of the panel's impeachment investigation. The first vote the committee has taken related to the potential impeachment of President Donald Trump. Of course, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Matter of fact, she had a press conference this week to talk about gun control. And she had to shut down the press conference because folks continue to ask her about this impeachment. Should the Democrats be moving in that direction? We talked about this before. The House, we won the House. The Democrats won the House. A lot of those candidates were saying that we would be going after President Trump. Is that the right move right now?
Yeah, that's the correct move, and the Democrats will not lose anything if they take that move. They may gain the ultimate result, which is moving Trump out of the campaign and the possibility of being president of the United States. But yeah, I say they ought to take that chance and move the chess pieces in that direction.
Nither?
You already know. I've said it on the show a long time ago that they should have done it ages ago, but I don't think Pelosi's really, I don't know. I don't see her moving on this anytime soon. I could be wrong, but I don't know. It should have been done ages ago, and I really think they fumbled the ball in terms of timing.
So you're
They
saying
should have done it a long
so
time ago.
So there's a possibility that this can hurt
I mean,
the
there's
Democratic Party.
there's always a possibility they could do it, but in terms of framing the narrative, the timing, the momentum, I feel like they already fumbled the ball with
Okay,
it.
gotcha. I'm gonna get to John Bolton.
Wow,
in
you
one
use a sports analogy there?
I did. You
Fumbled
should be
the
happy.
ball.
There you
Wow.
go.
Well
There
done.
you go. Thank you.
This week, President Trump had a victory. Supreme Court allows Trump administration to enforce toughest restrictions yet on asylum requests. So now it seems like through the U.S. Supreme Court this past Wednesday gave the Trump administration permission to enforce its toughest restrictions. As a result, the government can now refuse to consider a request for asylum from anyone who failed to apply for it in another country after leaving home but before coming here. The order means, for instance, that migrants from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador cannot seek asylum in the United States if they didn't first ask for it in Mexico.
Yep, it's basically pretty much halting the asylum process, while at the same time, this administration is now moving to reduce the number of refugees allowed into the country to 0. It's already the lowest it has ever been since they started recording the number of refugees allowed in, and now they're going to move to make it to 0. And there are also rollbacks to legal immigration that is happening, that's taking place. And then you saw what happened with folks even in the Bahamas who were trying to come here, and then they were stopped. So there's stuff happening all the time in terms of folks being stopped from entering the country, and changes that they're putting in that are going to have a long-lasting impact in terms of the demographics of the country. And this is all to stop that, actually, honestly. I mean, you can't stop it, but to slow it down or whatever have you, to slow down the quote-unquote browning of America.
Of course, Trump had a victory. It's his court.
Yeah.
It's his Supreme Court.
There you go.
It's a court that he's stacked with his appointees and is now probably will go down in history as the most right-wing Supreme Court we've had in at least 100 years. And so, you know, we shouldn't be surprised that the court ruled in his favor. We have to note, though, that Justice Ginsburg and Justice Sotomayor issued strong dissents in that case.
And speaking of the court being stacked, the Times had a piece, I believe, last night that came out about Kavanaugh and how there's other accusations against him too that apparently weren't investigated properly, weren't looked into, because remember when supposedly the investigation was done, they barely did anything. So all of this stuff is coming out now, but meanwhile, this guy was rushed through, and the court, as Larry said, is stacked in their favor.
It's amazing what President Trump has done, not being a former politician, coming and becoming president, and now it seems like the Republican Party is shaking at their boots. You got other people now that want to run for president, and now you're seeing states saying that they will not hold primaries going forward to challenge Trump. And you got to realize those candidates going in a debate with President Trump, they most likely will win on policy issues.
Right.
Of course, when it comes to bullying, you know how Trump goes, and he did that before
Yeah.
against some seasoned veteran Republican candidates in the past. So if you're not scared, President Trump, then why don't you take him on? Why don't the Republican Party allow you to do this?
Well, you know, his answer is going to be, well, I'll take on anyone's. I had nothing to do with it, which, you know, his fingerprints are on so many different things, but he's quick to say, I didn't do it, right? So even this nonsense about the storm and having NOAA, that agency, send out messages to back up his ridiculous claim that Alabama was in the eye of it, right? And again, you know, we were talking about.
I mean, Sharpie Gate?
Yeah, Sharpie Gate. We were talking about, you know, in terms of gaffes and things of that nature, right? He could have squashed this, right? He could have said, hey, I looked at a very early, report, which there was an early report. But he made his statement 3 to 4 days after. There had been numerous updates to the modeling. And those up-to-date models did not have Alabama getting anything in there. It would have been real easy for him to say, I was looking at something old. But because he never can be wrong, he goes and gets a Sharpie and does it. And then what goes on in his politicized administration people's jobs are threatened. And so as a result, they compromise themselves and make these ridiculous comments to support what he's doing. And then he says, I had nothing to do with it. So these primaries, I had nothing to do with it. I'd fight anybody. When we know behind the scenes, he has his lackeys, his supporters, his zealots who are going there threatening people who, quite honestly, are making decisions to either protect their jobs, protect their livelihoods, or not, have the wrath of him come out. And then you got John Bolton, who I think is going to be interested in the next few weeks and months, because he's not afraid. And that's been one of his challenges in his political career, is that he's been a hawk around things. And he pissed off Obama. He's pissed off a lot of other people with his very strong statements. And you already see now, he said, I offered my resignation. Trump says, I fired him. Bolton says, no, I resigned. And then what's the first thing he does afterwards? He reinstitutes his political action committee, his PAC, to go against some of the practices of this
So
administration.
that came out, as Bobby just stated, President Trump state that he fired, earlier this week, he fired John Bolton, his third national security advisor, this past Tuesday, basically amid fundamental disagreements over how to handle major foreign policy challenges like Iran, North Korea, and Afghanistan. Trump announced his decision on Twitter, and he stated, I informed John Bolton last night that his service are no longer needed at the White House. I disagree strongly with many of his suggestions, as did others in the administration, and therefore I asked John for his resignation, which was given to me this morning. I thank John very much for his service. I will be naming a new national security advisor next week.
So again, I've said this before and I say it again, right? For everyone who voted for him and said they voted for him because he's a good business person, that was wrong then. And everything he does now reinforces he is not very good at running anything other than by fear and intimidation. You would not have this much turnover in any company, any company who had this much churn. Investors, customers would look at it and say, why would I do business with them? They're unstable, right? And then he talks about he knows great people and the best this and all of that. If that's the case, he would not be making statements that we've disagreed from day one. How did you hire somebody who
which is why I think Bolton likely left. I think that is the more believable scenario.
But Rex called them names as well, right?
I personally am happy to see Bolton go. The Hawk, and exactly, no tears for Bolton. But the question is, what is he going to be replaced with? Is it going to be another Hawk? And at the end of the day, if you look at even statements that Pompeo is making now in regards to Iran and Saudi Arabia, they are still very hawkish, like because of the attacks that happened in Saudi Arabia. Pompeo is already coming out and saying we have to hold Iran accountable, even though it's the Houthi rebels that did it. And he's directly going at Iran. We need to respond. We need to hold them accountable.
With no evidence.
Exactly. And I'm like, what does that mean? And there's a lot that's happening in regard to that region in and of itself, because the UN General Assembly is coming up at the end of the month, which I will be there, not in all of it, but in some of it. So it'll be interesting to see if Rouhani and Trump do sit down and talk actually, and what happens with the Iran deal now, because Trump is trying to save face with the fact that he dismantled the deal by pulling us out, and now we're offering, because of France and their intervention, we're offering a $15 billion deal to help offset the sanctions that we put in place. I mean, it's crazy.
Rouhani said he's not going to sit down.
Exactly.
But to that point, right? Again, there's been a pattern, right? Anybody paying any bit of attention, there's been a pattern, right? He makes it about himself. His negotiating style is, I don't care about anything else. Let me just get in a room and meet with them. And everyone he's met with has played him, right? Putin has played him. North Korean leader has played him. China, the head of China has played him. They've all played him. So they met him in person, and they go and do exactly what it is they want to do. his advisors tell him that's not the way you negotiate. Don't tell me I'm the master negotiator.
Right.
He's not. He's not very good at it. He thinks he is. And so what he now realized is in order to get deals done, you need allies around the world. Europe said, hold up. We're not getting out of that deal with Iran. We think they're complying, but we also
Right.
think that we can get some gain out of this.
Some financial. Right.
And so now they're trying to get, Macron is trying to get Trump back into this to
Right.
say, you got to do this
But it's so
here.
ridiculous that
It
this
is.
is the deal that he screwed up, and now he's trying to get back to the deal that Obama had in place.
Right.
Pretty much like a different, pretty much the same version of it. But it's like you're the one who dismantled
He
it.
did the same
and-
thing with NAFTA, right?
Yep.
He said, oh, NAFTA was bad, but he put in place, which is still not even up and running yet, is NAFTA 2.0, which is almost the same thing. And it plays out with the Affordable Care Act, right? We're going to dismantle it. Where are we now? It's still in place, even though they try to put a lot of holes in it. Right. And what the Republicans are now talking about is just really trying to fix some of the things that they should have fixed 6 years ago with this.
Exactly. Moving along, turning the page on that, and I'll apologize if I mispronounce this person's name. Is it Felicity?
Felicity. Huffman.
Felicity,
Felicity.
yeah, actress, former Desperate Housewife actress Felicity Huffman gets 2 weeks in jail for gaming educational system, basically paying money for her daughter and numerous other folks, basically paying so that their children could get into these prestigious colleges or get higher SAT scores. And Felicity Huffman, again, was sentenced to 14 days in prison beginning October 25th, followed by a year of supervised release and 250 hours of community service. Huffman was also hit with a $30,000 fine, and she said that she accepted the court's decision without reservation. But we are seeing white privilege. Because remember the black homeless woman named Tanya McDowell, who got 5 years for using the wrong address to put her son in kindergarten. Your thoughts?
And you also had Kelly. You also had a Kelly Bolar back in 2011 who was sent to jail, found guilty and sent to jail on a felony charges of doing similar things that Tanya McDowell did, which is falsify her address to get her children into a different school district. Until John Kasich of Ohio stepped in a few years later to get the charge dropped from a felony to a misdemeanor. And actually, in this ruling here, the judge cited the Bolar case as we need to be consistent with things, because Bolar spent like 15 days in jail, I believe. But again, it started off as a felony. And then it took the government to one of the government officials to step in to campaign on her behalf to get it changed to a misdemeanor. But nothing's happened to Tanya McDowell. 5 years, homeless woman trying to do the best for her children.
That's correct.
And that's the same argument Huffman put in. You know, for me to be deemed as as a good mother, I was trying to do the best for my child. There's a big difference between trying to get them into a different school district versus falsifying and saying that my child is, you know, this star academic and this star athlete, just so they can get into a good college.
Exactly. So again, one justice system, separate and unequal.
But not equal. I have a question for Judge, actually. So she admitted guilt, but the other actress, what's her name? The Full House
didn't forget.
woman.
Lori McLaughlin.
Yes. So she didn't. So what do you think? Do you think that she's going to end up in a worse situation, or do you think she might actually be able to beat her?
Microphone.
You know, oh,
Microphone. Microphone. Microphone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Potentially, she could suffer a greater result for her, and I'm going to put this in quotes, her late failure to come forward and try to resolve the matter in an amicable way. So she may have a big surprise when she gets before the judge, because the judge may impose a much tougher penalty.
Yeah, that's
what I was thinking
yeah,
too. Yeah.
because they have like 30 25 or more parents who still have to go through the
Right.
court process.
Exactly.
And so now that you get one of the big names in there, does it sort of set the standard
It does.
for everyone else? And then anybody who doesn't take the plea or admit guilt,
They face a higher
higher
and a much more,
okay. Yeah.
they face a higher charge and a little bit more time.
Got it.
Well, let me turn the page on something. 18 years ago, this past Wednesday, I received a call from Bob Slade about a little after 9 a.m. Brother, what are you doing, brother? I need you to go down to the World Trade Center. We got 2 planes that hit the World Trade Center, and I got stuck at my other job at that particular time, so I couldn't go down. I also worked in One World Trade Center some years back before 9/11 took place, and I always wonder what would I've done if I would have been in one of those buildings, and if I would have. I'm the kind of person who believe in helping people, and if I didn't run back into the burning building because I wasn't a firefighter, I know that I would have been in the vicinity because the radio station wanted to do updates, and they needed a live person to go down there, and Bob Slade gave me a call, and I already had in the vision where I was going to set up, right in front of Century 21 or near the Burger King that was down there near the train station. Somewhere down there I would have been close, not thinking that these buildings were going to come down. And I knew for a fact when I worked there that asbestos, it was a big project to remove the asbestos, so they didn't remove it. They used some type of chemical to go over the asbestos. So when former governor, EPA chief Whitman said that the air was clean, and I knew she was lying. And so 18 years this past Wednesday was September 11th, 2001, where nearly 3,000 people were killed that day. Across New York City, you had Pennsylvania, where one flight went down, and also another plane crashed into the Pentagon. I just, real quick, because me and my wife pretty much watch, every year, Channel 7 have them reading the names of those who died in the tragedy of 9/11, and it just brings me back to that day. A beautiful sunny day. Weather was just beautiful. It was primary day here in New York City, and people were going to and fro. And matter of fact, one of the biggest sports stories that night was Michael Jordan coming back to the NBA to
Right.
play
Was it?
That
probably was not
that was
paying
one of the
attention to
biggest
that.
stories, sports stories.
That he was gonna
It's
rejoin.
interesting you say that about being in the. So a good friend of mine worked on the 83rd floor, I believe, of the North Tower, and told me a story about how he and his coworker helped carry down another coworker 83 flights or whatever. I'm like, I can't even imagine that. And till this day, like the trauma, and I call him every September 11th, and the trauma that he even said that he didn't realize until years later how it impacted his life and just the ramifications of it. Like he just went on and acted like everything was fine, just being your typical macho guy, like, oh no, I'm fine, everything's okay. But it wasn't until later that he realized that he had to really deal with these issues and just how he even put off certain things in his life and, stopped in his career and just all sorts of stuff that happens. Actually, the Times did a really good piece about PTSD that survivors like him have suffered around the country, because there's people who moved away and went elsewhere. Like they focused, I think, on a woman who moved to Florida and ended up losing her house and getting a DUI, and then she realized also that it was because of this that she never dealt with.
Right.
But I want to say though too, but that being said, like September 11th, 2001 was so horrific on so many levels, because it's the 3,000 people that were killed, the loss of, liberties and things that we then in turn suffered here, then not to mention the war on terror around the world, which has gone on to kill millions of people, destabilize entire countries, and actually given rise to more terror. And we don't focus enough on that, and there's not enough coverage of that in the media of how, going into into places like Iraq, destabilizing that, allowing that to give rise to groups like ISIS, which is now spilled over everywhere. And that's what I did a piece this week for Alternet about that, and the failed talks with the Taliban, and how civilians are being killed constantly in places like Afghanistan and elsewhere, and terror groups are on the rise, and nobody cares about those lives and talks about them. So what happened on that day had so many ramifications everywhere in our response, in everything,
And
in every
also people
aspect
who
of
was
life.
also sick from the dust that they
Yeah, right.
inhale.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
I was down there when the first plane hit. I was actually on the subway underneath, and typically I get off at the back of at the train platform. Because there was really only two exits at that station, and I got stuck in the middle. So it was a long line at the back. So I ended up going towards the front. And when you go to the front, you'd end up in the courtyard in the shopping plaza area underneath the Trade Center. And people were running and screaming. And they were screaming, they're shooting, they're shooting. Now, I had been down there when there was the first bombing down there. So, but I'm thinking shooting, my brain, it didn't register. I'm like, who would be shooting? Shooting just seemed foreign, but I'm watching people being carried with bloody legs. I'm like, well, I guess someone is shooting. So then I go upstairs on Liberty Street, and across the street on Church, there's a whole bunch of people staring up. And it was a Burger King on Liberty, and people are standing in front of there. They're looking up. And I start to look up, and I see this smoke coming out of the building. Debris falls down on my shirt. My shirt catches on fire. I start putting it out.
Wow.
And then I start walking away from the building. And I'm like, and I said out loud, I'm like, wow, what happened? And this guy said, a plane went in the building. And I said, well, that's a bad accident. That's this thinking accident.
Yeah.
That's what everybody thought.
Right.
Yeah.
So then as I get further away, more debris is coming down. I get into, believe it or not, I was working in 40 Wall Street, which was a Trump building at the time. I get in there and I get upstairs, and that's when the second plane hit. And it just at that immediate point, you're like, that's no accident. Something's going on. And it was just crazy pandemonium there. You had said something, Fatima, about that day. 3,000 deaths in there. It could have been a lot worse because it was primary day and it was the first day of school. And so many adults took their time to either take their children to school that day or go out there to vote. And so that reduced the amount of people who normally would be down there. And then this trauma, right? So where I was working, we were hit badly down there. And so, a company I'm at, we go through a lot of business continuity plans. So that immediately kicked in. So that rest of that week, that's what my brain is, right? Accounting for people who work for us and all this. So then that Friday night, I called two friends of mine who were police officers and firefighters. And I said, can I get down there? And they said, well, it's hard to get down there, but come on down. So they let me get down, and I get down to the site. And then it all hit me about what was going on. And I remember it was chilly, it was raining that Friday night. I go back home, and I slept for 9 hours. That Monday, I went to talk to, because we had arranged employee assistance, and I speak to a counselor, and the counselor said the exact same thing you just said about your friend. I was running off of adrenaline. My body was in shock. It went through an extreme stress. And that sleep that I had, because I went to see the aftermath of it, allowed my body to reset, and I finally started listening back to my body out there. It did tremendous damage. And the last thing I'll say about it, and you were talking about the domino effect that 9/11 had, right? I do find it ironic that as a result of that, we have all this security that trying to get around, the NSA can monitor more and all these things there. And the vast majority of Americans are okay with that. But they're not okay with the NRA and taking away weapons. And so you're going to say, well, we need to do this to protect ourselves. That's why we put up with the security. But we don't need that to protect ourselves from weapons of war that are in the classrooms where kids are being taught to dive underneath their chairs.
I was a former employee at One World Trade Center. Years ago, I worked for the Port Authority in Newark, and I worked, in New York. And I worked up on the 5th floor. And when it happened, when World Trade went down, I was no longer employed, but I still knew and had some contact.
Were you there in 93?
Yeah, I was there. 1992 was when I was there, and I knew a number of employees there. And the thing that I was thankful for most was that all of the people that I worked with who were still working there when it happened, they all got out alive, and I was very thankful for that. The day it happened, I was at the governor's conference. Governor Whitman had a conference on racial profiling at the, I believe it was at the Sheraton. It was at the, we were staying at the Sheraton Hotel. I think the conference was either at the Sheraton or at the Convention Center, which was right across the street. And so the majority of people that were there were law enforcement people. Now, I was standing in my room, hotel room, looking at TV. Harry Belafonte was being interviewed on Channel 4 about being named the UNESCO ambassador. And then they interrupted to bring the announcement that the center was going down. And so for 45 minutes, I was literally froze in one place looking at the screen. But some things stand out about me, and I'll try to bring this to an end. Number one, when the buildings fell, when you saw it on television, they fell like powder.
Mm-hmm.
It was like they just, like they weren't even solid.
Just collapsed.
And then number two, there was an immediate attempt to blame the Palestinians. I remember, I think it was either Tom Brokaw or one of the, said there's suspicion that this may have been carried out by members of the PLO. You know, I mean,
Trump,
how would
remember,
they,
Trump still claims that there were Muslims celebrating in
right.
Jersey, which is such a lie.
How would they have known that? So my thing about 9/11 now is they issued an official report. The last chapter of the report was unanswered questions. Now, this is in the official 9/11 report, a whole chapter on unanswered questions about 9/11, how it happened, who did it, etc. None of those questions have ever been answered in the official report. Mm-hmm. Then number two, you look at how the Trade Center fell. There's no way two buildings could fall perfectly within their own imprint.
2 buildings, 3 buildings,
three-
7, it didn't get hit.
Right.
7
Right.
World Trade Center fell.
So people did not accept the official narrative. There was a referendum in New York City. The majority of people voted. It was a vote. It was a referendum. It was a question put on the ballot. Should the 9/11 attack be reinvestigated, be reopened and investigated?
Yes.
Everybody, it passed overwhelmingly. The government went into court to have the vote nullified. They nullified a decision of the people of this city to reopen an investigation of probably the most cataclysmic event to occur in this city, maybe since the city came into existence.
Yeah.
So today, you know, I stand with those people who call for reopening the investigation. I do not accept the popular narrative of what happened.
Could I just add in there this real quick, and then I want to turn it over to Bobby to do a quick sports update. I received a call that week after OpenLine, Sunday, from a brother I knew. And when he told me something, I called Bob on it, but we decided not to go with the story. The gentleman called me and said, "Listen, I'm telling you that certain people were told not to go in that direction," and they were talking about Jewish folks, some Muslim folks too, were told not to go that day to be down there. I told Bob Slade, and Bob was like, "Well, Fatine,
said this?
This is a personal contact I knew," and I didn't. I called Bob on it, and Bob said, "Well, Fatine, we don't have any concrete evidence, so if I put that out there, it becomes conspiracy, and then at the end of the day, if we can't back that up, then I put myself in jeopardy, and I agree with that. I totally agreed with him. What bothered me next, this is when I said something is wrong. When my wife went to do her get a blood transfusion, she went to Long Island College Hospital. And Long Island College Hospital, which is not there no more, is downtown Brooklyn on Atlantic Avenue off of the water. And you can see the buildings. And this lady, her name was Linda, I don't know, you give her last name. She said she was looking for me. She's been trying to see me come into the hospital. She brought me in the office and sat down. And when she said, Fatine, you know how many people had walked in there? That day, before it got hit, some people saying, we were told not to come to work because something was going to happen. Wow. When that was told to me and I received that phone call, I said, something is not right. And since then, these stories, what you're talking about, are not. These are not man-made. I don't think they're man-made stories. I don't think they're lies. I think something was up. Right. I don't know who, where, government conspiracy. I don't know, right. But something is wrong. Absolutely. Something is wrong. And also, Nilla, I guess you can say this: Osama bin Laden's family. They made mention, but I saw this printed in the newspaper that his family that was in the United States, they got flown out.
Yeah,
I was
going to say, I don't know about the conspiracy theories, so I'm not going to talk about that, but I was going to talk about that aspect that the family was flown out, and that 15 of the hijackers, 15 I believe, were from Saudi Arabia. Until this day, we have the best relations with Saudi Arabia. We give them billions in military funding. They're not on the Muslim ban. And they're not on the Muslim ban. Trump has made the relationship even better. We're supplying the weaponry for them to bomb the civilians in Yemen and whatnot. So that aspect of it, the fact that they are never held accountable, and there were even families of the victims who were trying to sue the Saudi government and then were stopped from doing so. Yeah. So the fact that they have never been held accountable for anything, and instead we launched a war where in Iraq and elsewhere all around the world,
had
that part of it is ridiculous.
Nothing to do with
exactly. And also, President Obama, on his watch, he got Osama bin Laden. A reason why I give credit to Trump now, because the story just came out this week. The end of the week is amazing.
It did not technically.
No, wait.
It didn't come out.
I'm getting there. I'm going there. That's where I was going. Let me set that up. I was going to say it came out this week, the end of the week. Trump saying that Osama bin Laden's son was killed. But it's been out there for months that he was killed. And I was saying in the back of my head, this is something, I said back then, this is going to be something that that President Trump and his administration will use on a timely fashion when something he needs to put him out there to change the narrative of what was going on. And that's where I agree with you, Nilla.
The failed talks with the Taliban, the peace deal that didn't happen, and this is why they put that out.
I think it's yet another example of a cover-up. And you can call me whatever you want, but, it's a game that they play with the public. They make statements and ring the alarm, and then when everything is settled down, they move events in the way they want them. Look at Jamal Khashoggi. Why are we not talking about Jamal Khashoggi? The most horrific killing, probably, of an individual that we can remember, in violation of all international law and protocol. This man was killed in an embassy. Chopped up, this body dismembered. Nobody's talking about it. Khashoggi, 9/11, and we could just go on down the line with one thing after another. And in fact, they use the accusation of conspiracy theory to, in fact, to try to delegitimize anybody that questions the official narrative.
Exactly. I want to go over to, because Bobby Charles has to get to the Giant game. Bobby, I'm going to throw it to you. We'd like to get some updates on the New York sports team and also this whole situation and cloud over Antonio Brown.
So some quick headlines, right? The Yankees continue to roll. They're about 45 games over 500. So it's really now about getting ready for the playoffs. And the big question there is, will they get the right pitching to go with their strong hitting to compete? Their main obstacle to get to the World Series is going to be the Houston Astros. Houston has a dynamite, pitching staff in terms of their starters. Their bullpen, not so much, but their starters. So that's the big question. And Luis Severino, who's missed most of the season, he's on his way back. So fingers crossed, Yankee fans, that Severino can do it. On the other side of town, the Mets continue to compete to try to get into the playoffs. So they had a big game last night against the Dodgers. They win 3-0. Jacob deGrom throws a nice game out there. Again, doesn't get the win, but keeps them in the running.
Three games back in the wild
Three,
card.
3 games back in the wild card. It's going to be tough for them, though, because they have so many teams they have to beat out, and they have 14 games left. But at least there are people talking about the Mets in September because they're competing, and that is progress. On the football side, as I tell you, we're going to see the Giants. They're going to try to bounce back after losing last week to Dallas. They have the Buffalo Bills for the second week coming back to MetLife Stadium. And then the Jets, they're playing Monday night against the Cleveland Browns, and the Jets are just devastated by injuries, starting with their starting quarterback, who is out with mononucleosis.
Kissing disease.
Well, and that's the thing, right? And, it's easy for people to say, what, is he in high school? He got the kissing disease. But when you think about it, it weakens your body. So there's no timetable in terms of when he will get rid of this to come back. They lost Quincy Enunwa, one of their starting receivers. He's out for the year. Their linebacker, Mosley, is out. Queenan Williams, their number 1 draft pick, is out. So they're going Monday night, second game of the season, against a Cleveland Brown team with Odell Beckham Jr. and Baker Mayfield that wants to get rid of that disgusting performance they had last week where they embarrassed themselves against the Tennessee Titans. And just on Odell Beckham, again, he made the headlines this week in terms of last week's game. He wore a $350,000 watch on his wrist while he's playing
I did
game.
see that.
A Rolex?
You should be proud.
No,
I
I
paid
forget the
attention
name
to
of the
that news.
company, and so of course the NFL says you can't do it because it's
You
a
can
hard.
injure, right?
They
Yeah.
say it's a hard substance. You can injure someone. So he counters and says, "Well, I'm still going to wear a watch." Now I think it's a $30,000 or $130,000 watch. Anyway, it's soft out there. But so people are ridiculing him about drawing attention to himself. My theory is he has an endorsement deal that this company is not going to talk about, because the NFL is very, very strict around how do you endorse things while on the field. They don't allow other companies to put logos on it like soccer teams do and like the NBA has started to do. So I believe this is an attempt to him to get some promotion, which is no different than the actors and actresses and models who get loaners to go to these galas, the Met, and they wear all these diamonds and dresses and tuxes and watches and everything to bring attention to it, and they give him back. So I believe that's his play there. And then lastly, you talk about Antonio Brown. So he played with the Raiders. Now he's with New England. If you're following what he's doing, the way he's gone about getting out of Oakland has left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. New England to pick him up, and then the story breaks that he has a civil suit, not a criminal, a civil suit of sexual assault on a trainer of his, and whether New England knew it or not. And so he's been cleared to play. You're innocent until proven guilty. There's a lot of curious questions around whether this is just it's an accusation. Part of it is they were doing a settlement agreement where both parties agreed to not disclose anything. So that's why they're saying that's why they did not tell New England. New England is like, well, we should have known, and they cite this. And so when you think of it from a legal side, if you're in that type of agreement, then you must be close to settling something because you felt something did happen, right? Because why settle unless you feel it, right?
That's true.
And so now that those talks broke out, there's emails that Antonio Brown said that are so incoherent, but he does admit that they had sex, and he describes the sex act. But on the other side, she kept going back to him after and assaulted 3 different times. And so there's so many questions in it. And again, I start with it's a civil matter. It's not a criminal matter right now.
Right, exactly.
So-
He, matter of fact, Antonio Brown, he traveled with New England Patriots, and it looks like he will play today against the Dolphins.
Yep.
So we'll see where they're.
I want to throw in one more sport.
Yes,
Are
go
you
ahead.
finished?
You want
Yeah.
one more sports story, and then you mention your because we got to wrap
Yeah,
up.
I want to. This morning, Jeffrey Kamworor. If I
Say
can
that
it.
again.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Kamworor from Kenya, set a new world record for the half marathon in Copenhagen, Denmark.
Yep.
He ran a 58 minute and 1 second, 13.1 mile
God.
half marathon. He
Less
was
than an hour.
He was
Crazy.
averaging 4 minutes and 42 seconds
mile, huh?
per mile on that. And this
Cheetah running.
and this presages the great event that's going to happen next month with Eliud Kipchoge in Vienna. He's going to attempt to be the first human in history to break 2 hours in a full standard marathon.
That's insane.
His goal is 1 minute and 59 seconds.
Yeah.
That's his goal.
You have an event coming up this
Yes.
week?
On next Saturday, the People's Organization for Progress will be having our Impeach Trump Now march and rally. It will begin 12 o'clock noon at the Lincoln Monument in Newark, New Jersey. For your GPS, if you put in 12 Springfield Avenue, it will bring you right there, 12 Springfield Avenue. Otherwise, the monument is in front of the old Essex County Courthouse, and it's right there at the intersection of Springfield Avenue and West Market Street, right across the street from Essex County College. So that's next Saturday, September 21st, 12 o'clock noon, Lincoln Monument in the heart of downtown Newark. We're going to march to demand the impeachment of Trump. Even if they don't have the votes in the Senate, they have the votes in the House to impeach him, and at least POP and Nila Khan and others thinks he should be impeached.
For people to find out more about this event and more about the People's Organization for Progress, give out that number
Right.
real quick.
They can call People's Organization for Progress at 973-801-0001. I want to give a quick shout out to the Ubuntu Institute. I was in South Carolina yesterday. I was in Greensville, South Carolina.
North part of Carolina?
Yes, speaking on the issue of reparations at a conference. It was called the Chronic Conference, the Carolinas Human Right Institute Conference. They have it every year. It was the 6th annual conference. So, Brother Molefe Ascari and all the brothers and sisters from Ubuntu, thank you for inviting me down.
Great. The African American Day Parade is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, which is taking place today. The parade will run along Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard from West 111th Street to West 136th Street and the village of Harlem, starting at 1 p.m., running through until 6 p.m. this evening. It will feature celebrities, religious groups, labor unions, community sororities, fraternities, marching bands, and dancers. The participants are coming from over 12 states and many countries. We here at EMIS, that is WBLS 1190 WLIB and Hot 97, will have a float, and we will be front and center. DJ Red Alert and DJ Spazzo will be mixing on the float, and DJ Mitch and Dr. Bob Lee will be covering the Harlem State Office building today. So we look to see you down there.
Will you be on the float,
I will
Fatim?
be on the float. I'm
Sounds
going to get ready to
fantastic.
get ready to get out of here. Also, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, and we're doing this, brother. I tell you, I look up for Brother Bob Slade. The parade is in your hometown, brother. Bob Slade, a Harlem, New York native. Bob Slade was able to live his dream of helping others, keep his vision and community through education alive by making a difference in a student's life by donating to the Bob Slade Scholarship Fund. How do you do that? You go to the WBLS website, WBLS.com, and you can find out more information, and you can make your donation there. To all those out there that know, and to those that don't know, our brother Bob Slade was battling kidney disease, and he passed on March 23rd this year. But through us and through the Bob Slade Scholarship Fund, his legacy will live on. So I wanted to say that.
Yes, indeed.
This morning. And again, as we mentioned, that Central Park 5, now known as the Exonerated 5, you can see a one-on-one interview that I conducted with them last Saturday at the Circle of Sisters, and also one with civil rights activist Tamika Mallory. So that pretty much wraps up the OpenLine online show today. Bobby Childs, take us out.
Listen, as the great, wise Bob Slade has said, get your mind right and keep a good thought. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate all your comments. We do read them. I know some of you are unhappy with the audio. Some of you think we're talking in the dark. We do have people who monitor it. And I do want to speak out on one comment. We expressed like audio question. There is no conflict between Larry Ham and Jennifer.
Nope.
So please don't start that. She had a previous engagement. She's here.
She said that.
We do have spirited conversations, so please don't put that out there, because that is truly fake news.
Exactly.
So thank you for tuning in.
Right. God bless you, and have a
Peace.
great week coming up.